The day before my wedding should have been calm. Instead, it started with a phone call from my fiancé, Daniel. "Hey," he said, "my mom wants you to come to dinner tonight." I frowned slightly. "Tonight? But the rehearsal dinner is tomorrow." "I know," he said quickly. "She just wants something small. Just family." Something about the way he said it felt careful, like he was choosing his words. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he replied quickly. "She just wants to talk before the wedding." That didn't make me feel much better. Daniel's mother, Patricia, had never exactly warmed up to me. She wasn't openly rude, but every conversation with her felt like a quiet evaluation. Little questions about my job, my background, my family, the kind of questions that sounded polite, but always seemed to measure whether I was good enough. Daniel came from a very wealthy family. His parents owned several successful real estate developments, and their name carried a lot of influence in the city. My background was much simpler. I worked hard, built my own career, and lived comfortably, but I definitely didn't come from the same kind of money. Patricia had noticed that immediately. A few months earlier, during a family dinner, she asked me a question that made the entire table uncomfortable. "So," she said, sipping her wine, "what exactly do your parents do?" "My mom is a teacher," I answered. "And your father?" "He passed away when I was younger." She nodded slowly. "I see." The conversation moved on after that, but the tone had already changed. Since then, I could tell she still had doubts about me marrying her son. So when Daniel told me she wanted a private dinner the night before the wedding, I knew it probably wasn't just a friendly meal. Still, I agreed. That evening, I arrived at Daniel's parents' house, a massive property on the edge of the city. The kind of place with a long driveway, tall iron gates, and windows glowing warmly from inside. A house that looked more like a small estate than a home. Daniel greeted me at the door. "You made it," he said with a nervous smile. "Of course," I replied. Inside, the dining room table was already set. Patricia sat at the head of the table. Daniel's father was beside her, quietly reading something on his phone. When Patricia saw me, she smiled politely. "I'm glad you could come," she said. "Thank you for inviting me." Dinner started normally enough. Small talk, polite conversation, nothing unusual. But halfway through the meal, Patricia gently placed her fork down. Then she looked directly at me. "There's something I'd like to discuss before tomorrow," she said. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Daniel shifted slightly in his seat. Patricia folded her hands calmly. "You see," she continued, "marriage is a very serious commitment." I nodded. "Of course. And when families like ours combine," she added, "certain precautions are sometimes necessary." My stomach tightened slightly because I had a feeling I already knew where this conversation was going. But what Patricia said next was much worse than I expected. Patricia reached beside her plate and picked up a thin folder. The moment I saw it, my suspicion was confirmed. She slid it slowly across the table toward me. "A prenuptial agreement," she said calmly. Daniel shifted in his seat. "Mom." But Patricia raised her hand slightly, stopping him. Patricia stared at the numbers on my phone. "This says your company is worth $50 million?" I nodded calmly. Daniel looked between us, stunned. "You never told me that." I smiled slightly. "You never asked." I gently slid the prenuptial folder back across the table. "You're right about one thing," I said to Patricia. "Marriage does require precautions." Then I stood up. "So if we're signing agreements tomorrow." I paused. "My lawyer will be bringing one for Daniel to review too." "This is simply a precaution," she continued. "Families with significant assets must protect themselves." I looked down at the folder, but didn't open it yet. The room felt very quiet. Daniel's father still hadn't said a word. Patricia watched me carefully. I assume you understand why this is necessary, she added. I finally opened the folder. The document inside was thick, far more detailed than I expected. Page after page of legal terms, asset protections, financial restrictions. And then I noticed something else. A clause near the middle of the document. I read it again, just to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. Then I looked up. This says I would receive nothing if the marriage ended. I said calmly. Patricia nodded. That's correct. Even if we were married for years. Yes. Even if we had children. Yes. Daniel finally spoke. Mom, that's not. But she cut him off again. This is standard for families in our position. I closed the folder slowly. Patricia leaned back in her chair, clearly expecting resistance. You can review it tonight, she said. My lawyer will be present tomorrow morning before the ceremony. Tomorrow morning? I asked. Yes. The timing was obvious. They had intentionally waited until the last possible moment. Pressure, emotion, a situation where saying no would feel impossible. Daniel looked at me apologetically. I didn't know it would be this strict. He said quietly. I studied Patricia's face. Did you plan this dinner just to give me this document? She didn't hesitate. Yes. At the last minute. Yes. Why? Her answer was immediate. Because tomorrow you become part of this family. She paused. And I need to be sure your intentions are honorable. There it was. The real reason. She didn't trust me. Not because of anything I had done, but because of where I came from. Patricia continued speaking calmly. Daniel has access to significant wealth, she said. Real estate, investments, businesses. She gestured toward the folder. This agreement ensures that none of that can be taken advantage of. I stayed quiet for a moment. Then I asked one simple question. Does Daniel agree with this? Daniel hesitated. I didn't realize the document would look like this. That's not what I asked. He looked at me carefully. I trust you. Patricia sighed softly. Trust is emotional. Contracts are practical. She folded her hands again. So she said, will you sign it? The room was completely silent. I slowly closed the folder and placed it on the table. May I ask one question first? I said. Patricia nodded. Of course. I looked directly at her. If I sign this, what exactly are you protecting? She smiled faintly. Our family's assets. I nodded slowly. Real estate. Yes. Investments. Yes. Businesses. Yes. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Interesting. Patricia frowned slightly. What's interesting? That you think Daniel is the one bringing all the assets into this marriage. Daniel looked confused. What do you mean? I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Then I opened a document and placed it on the table. Patricia glanced down at the screen. What is this? A financial disclosure. I said calmly. Daniel leaned closer. Then his eyebrows lifted slightly. Wait. Patricia picked up the phone. She scanned the numbers quickly. Then she read them again. Her expression slowly changed. This can't be right, she said quietly. But it was, because the document showed something she had clearly never considered. Daniel wasn't the wealthier one in this relationship. Not even close.